it is Tuesday morning. We've only got like 2 days until Thanksgiving. It's hard to believe this year has gone by so fast, and it's like 3 weeks removed from the election, which it's like, man, before we know it, it is going to be 2025. It'll be like Thanksgiving of 2025 before we know it. It's crazy. Hey guys, I'm happy to be back. We made it happen. For those of you that caught the episode over on iTunes and Spotify yesterday, you know that I had some technical difficulties with the show. Well, not with the show, but with the homestead here in the office. I record the episodes out in my office. It's a little building that we redid on the property, and I turn it into my office in my studio to do the podcast. And I built another building on the property, and I was getting ready to install the electric, and we had to trench it in. And for whatever reason, the internet cable was buried in the same area as the area we needed to bury in the new electrical line. So we severed the internet line to the office, to the studio. And so I didn't have internet. And then I had to go to Texas for a few days, pretty much all last week, for a conference on campgrounds. And I meant to call the internet company prior to leaving to go to Texas, down to San Antonio, and I forgot. And so by the time I got back and started doing prep to do the next show, it was too late. So that's why a lot of you reached out, and I appreciate it. You were like, hey, what's going on? You're not recording a show. And I'm like, well, no, I'm having technical hiccups right now. I don't have internet. So they came out yesterday. They rehooked it back up, and we are good to go. So just happy to be back with you. And I'm so grateful for all of you that reached out and were inquiring as to why there was no show. So thank you very much. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. So Trump's picks are in. There's a handful left to go, and 60% of America is liking what they're seeing so far, according to a new CBS News poll. There's a Rasmussen poll. I believe it's Rasmussen poll that's also out. That it was either Rasmussen or Reuters or one of those that has similar stats. Now, I know we don't all trust the polls, but so far, 60%, according to the polls that we all trust so much, Trump is 60% of Americans are actually happy with what they see. But I want to talk about some of those picks today. The media still falling apart. They have a major identity crisis right now. Ratings are still dropping like a brick. It's bad news for the media these days, and rightfully so. And we're going to get into that a little bit today. They have a major identity crisis. But before we get into that, as always, guys, if you haven't went out and picked up a copy of We the Puppets, the audience for the best illusion ever performed, please do so. You can do so over on Amazon.com, or you can go to my website, JustinStaten.com, and pick up a signed copy over there. If that's more your bag. If you want the signed copy, I'll actually literally write a note to you and sign it and ship it right to your door. It's the holiday season. They make a great Christmas present. So if you're wanting to give somebody something different or a stocking stuffer, pick up a copy of the book, We the Puppets. It'll make a great stocking stuffer. It's a thought-provoking book, and the feedback is in, and it's all been good so far. So for those of you that have already went out and picked up a copy, I really appreciate you. I love you. And if you guys are listening to this over on iTunes or Spotify, I don't think it's iTunes anymore. That dates me. That shows you how old I am. Apple Podcast. If you listen to this over on Apple Podcast or Spotify, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. Like those weeks where I'm traveling or out of town and can't really put a show together, you'll know, because you won't get the notification that there's a new episode. But when I come back and do a new episode, you'll be the first person to know, because it will alert you that there is a new episode. Also, leave me a rating and review over there so that, it'll help push the show up in the algorithm. A lot of you have been doing that lately, and I really appreciate you. But that'll help other people find the show organically. And it means the world to me. I look at every review, every rating, every comment. Some of you come to the website and post comments, and I love that. I read every single one of them, and it means the world to me, because I do want to make the show good for you guys. And to not belabor the point too much, it's really important right now that we not get sucked back in, to partisan politics. We've had a great outcome. We got Trump, the outsider, back into office. So far, he's doing really good, with his picks. And I think a lot of Americans are happy. The polls, which again, I don't put a lot of weight behind the polls, are showing that a lot of Americans are happy with the picks. But I just want to make sure collectively we don't get sucked in. We have a responsibility over the next 2 years because the midterm, just like it's crazy to believe Thanksgiving is like 2 days out this year and we're already into the holiday season in 2024. The midterm elections are going to be here just as fast. And we have a tendency in America to get sucked into the lull of life and not pay attention to what's going on in Washington, D.C. And that is why we are where we are today. It's why we have 36 trillion in debt. It's why we have wide open borders. It's why we can't even find 500,000 kids that have crossed the border. It's not that we can't find 500. I think it's like there's 80,000 of the 500 that have streamed across that we can't even locate, something to that. But it's bad. Either way, it's bad. This is why we have bloated bureaucracies. And this is why we're so excited to have somebody like Donald Trump, an outsider, in office in DC, because we can look at our lives and look at what's going on, look at all the money we're wasting, all the money we've borrowed, and see that we're not going down the right road, right? Our government, our bureaucracies have gotten so bloated, so fat, have become an elitist class that essentially operate against the will of the people. And every cycle, guys, we go back to sleep and we don't pay attention to what's going on, and we end up right back where we started. And we can no longer do that. That is why I do the show. That's why I will keep bringing you episode after episode to keep you guys engaged. So I hope you keep coming back, keep tuning in. And this is a nonpartisan, so it's in the middle. In the middle doesn't mean that all my thoughts are middle of the road, or that I'm like a pacifist, or that I'm a centrist and I don't have an opinion on things. That is a mistake. And I've heard people say that, oh, in the middle. So you just don't have, any belief systems or any policy. No, no, no. That is not the case. On some things, I'm very conservative. On other things, I think, be considered more liberal. And then some of my beliefs are more libertarian, especially when it comes to the Constitution of the United States. And so the only reason this show is called In the Middle is because I don't subscribe to party politics. I don't think the Republican Party or the Democrat Party or the two-party system is good for America, period. The end. Full stop. And you can't convince me that it is. And that is why. So that I named the show In the Middle, because I think partisan politics is partially, if not completely, what has gotten us to where we are today in America. So we can't fall asleep. We have to pay attention. You guys got to, stay engaged. We got to stay engaged all the way down to the local levels, all the way up to what's going on in DC. All right, so I think I beat that up enough. Let's get into this Trump's cabinet pick. So far, Trump has pretty much laid out his entire cabinet. There's a handful of picks left to go. I think we're going to see those decisions probably before Thanksgiving. I don't see a reason Trump would wait until after Thanksgiving to announce these other. He might, just to kind of spread out the news cycle a little bit. But he's been so far pretty fast and furious on picking these. And as I said at the top of the episode, 60% of Americans like what they see so far, as do I. I think so far his picks have been pretty good. However, there are a couple that I want to talk to you guys about today because, again, we cannot get caught up in partisan politics. I understand Trump ran as a Republican, and the Republican Party is trying to tell you, oh, everybody, is coming to the Republican Party. I made the argument on a previous episode that I believe because of Trump and because of what has happened, both political parties are dead in America. I truly believe that, as they were. The Democrat Party is dead. It is trying to find its way. It is lost in the woods. It doesn't know what to do right now. But I also believe the Republican Party, the old guard, the way that it was, is also dead. And I think this is an opportunity right now in America to, rebuke the political parties and that system of the two parties, because essentially they're two different sides of the same coin. You guys hear me say that all the time because it's true. And I think both parties are dead. And you're starting to see some of the talking heads in the media say the same thing. It's not just that the Democrat Party lost their way and is essentially dead. So is the Republican Party. So we have a real opportunity here. And we have an opportunity not to get lulled back in to party politics. And that's so important right now to understand. And the reason it's important to understand is because with party politics comes groupthink. And when you subscribe to groupthink or tribalism, which we are naturally wired to do so, from our evolution as humans, to fall into tribalism and groupthink, but that is not good for us when it comes to things like running our country and politics. Because when you subscribe to tribalism or groupthink, you won't question any narrative that you see. Because if your side says this is the truth, and we've seen this, right? This is why the media is dying. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. That's why the media is dying. That's why I believe both parties are dying, because of tribalism and groupthink. When they say something, you just blindly go along with it because your side is the one saying it. And we can't fall victim to that kind of thinking or thought process anymore. We can't even do it with Trump, because just because Trump ran as a Republican doesn't mean he's a diehard Republican. And we have to keep this in mind. And just because Trump is the one we wanted and the one we picked doesn't mean we no longer hold Donald Trump accountable while he's president. Because you got to keep in mind, guys, we hired him. We voted him in. You're the boss. We are the boss. The people have always been, and our elitists in DC have tried to get us off of this track and off this thinking or these thought processes. But we are the boss. We are the ones in charge. We elect our leaders to go represent our interests, right? So the campaign is the interview process, right? So put yourself in the mode of being the boss, being the hiring manager. And the campaign process is the application process. And Trump and Harris, the cackling weirdo, went through the application process. We hired Donald Trump. Okay. We thought he was the best candidate for the job. We gave him the job. Now we have to hold him accountable. We do not. And I repeat, I don't care if you're MAGA extreme or whatever. I believe in the MAGA movement. I've said that openly and outwardly. I believe in everything that's happened. I'm excited, just like all of you are excited, but I have to make sure that we don't just fall blindly into this hole of just blind acceptance of everything that comes out of the Trump administration. We cannot do that. That is the opposite of accountability. So, how do we hold these people accountable? Well, based off of what questions they answered in the application process, i.e., the campaign. And there was a few key things that Trump said he was going to do for us, the American people, on our behalf, because it is what we want. One of the major ones that he campaigned on was draining the swamp, right? Draining the swamp. What's that mean? It means taking the bloat out of the bureaucracies. So it is finding efficiencies. It is cutting budgets. It is stop spending money and wasting money, our money, because again, the government's money is our money. Stop wasting it. That's the mandate, is to stop wasting our money. Cut the budgets, cut the bureaucracies, get rid of lifetime bureaucrats that aren't really adding anything to the American people's lives. Get rid of the elitist mentality. That's the biggest mandate that Trump has. As part of that, it's cleaning up the justice system, right? It's the weaponization of the Justice Department is obvious, and it has been clear over the last 9 years, because this all started back when Trump ran for president back in 2015 and 2016, when the Obama administration decided it was okay for them to spy on a political opponent in that campaign season. And it hasn't stopped from there. So part of this mandate is to drain the swamp, and a part of draining the swamp is to reform the Justice Department. It's to reform the FBI. It's to reform the intelligence agencies. Anybody in there that is an ideologue or, makes their decisions based off of political ideologies, they need to go. They need to go. They need to be weeded out, and anybody that violated the Constitution, violated Americans' rights, need to be held accountable. And we know, we all know that this has happened. And until we see prosecutions of people that knowingly and willingly violated the Constitution and weaponized our justice system, until we see those people held accountable and prosecuted, no, we're not going to believe that the system is reformed. Until we see the swamp being drained, we're not going to believe that it's happening. And so I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page, that yes, we're excited that Donald Trump is in. 60% of us so far like his cabinet picks. Yeah, I'm one of those people that would have said yes, I'm happy with his cabinet picks, with the exception of a couple. I'm going to talk about those here in a second. But we're excited. We're happy. Like what we wanted, that we hired the right person for the job. We all believe. But now is the part of holding that person accountable. It is so vitally important. And holding somebody accountable doesn't mean you're against them. And because I know that's the next thing coming. A lot of you out there are going to say, you're already trying to diminish Trump's, presidency. And no, 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 no. Accountability doesn't mean you're against somebody. Again, go back to this thought process of this being our employee, right? Trump is now, he works for us. He's our employee. And when you hold your employees accountable, that doesn't mean you want to fire them. It doesn't mean you're against them. It means you want them to do the job you hired them to do. And you will guide them and coach them and give them the feedback that is required for them to be successful in accomplishing the initiatives and the objectives you hired them for. Right? The first time an employee screws up, you just don't throw them out. You don't just fire them. You coach them, you guide them, you give them your feedback, right? And you remind them what the objective was. And we need to do the same thing with the Trump administration. We need to constantly remind them about what the objective was that we hired them for. And so over the next 2-3 years, we need to, especially this first year, this first 100 days are going to set the tone to whether or not Trump is going to do what we want him to do. Now, we also need to be cognizant of how much the deep state and the bureaucracies are going to fight back, because there are a lot of swamp monsters in Washington, D.C., and they are entrenched, and they've been entrenched for 50, 60, some of these establishments, 100 years or more. And they are really, really entrenched. These swamp monsters are going to fight back. We saw it in the first administration of Donald Trump. We're going to see it again. I think this time they know that he knows where the bodies are buried. He knows who they are, and they'll be some of the first people cut out of the government. I truly believe that. But if they are not, then it is up to us to hold the Trump administration accountable, to give that feedback. So I just want to make sure that we're not blindly jumping back into partisan politics. Forget about the Republican Party. Forget about the Democrat Party. Those parties are dead as we know them. And that's a good thing. Now it's the party of the people right now. Like, the people have spoken. And that was very evident in the demographics of this election. This was a people's election. This wasn't a Republican Party victory. Obviously wasn't a Democrat Party victory, but it also was not a Republican Party victory. This was a victory of the people. And we need to remember that moving forward. So let's get into some of these picks. First, I got to mention, like, for those of you on the left that subscribe to MSNBC, CNN, NBC, ABC, etc., you were told for over a year that Trump was a misogynist, that he was homophobic, that he was racist, that he was all these things. Just look at his cabinet picks. Just look at the people he's picked so far. I heard somebody say this last night. It was like the Chicken Little thing. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. If Trump gets into office, that everything's going to implode and the sky's going to fall. But look at the picks so far. Tell me how he's misogynist. He picked the first female chief of staff ever in the history of the United States of America. We have the first female chief of staff of the White House. How's that for misogyny? Many of his picks for some of the top jobs in America are women. So you can pretty much scratch out the fact that Donald Trump is a misogynist. I mean, he has gay folks that he has picked. And some of the, like Scott Bessent, who we're going to talk about here in a second at Treasury. Scott Bessent, if confirmed, which it looks like he will be the number one highest cabinet member that is, outwardly homosexual and gay. But yet you guys called Trump a homophobe for months and years. So, he's starting to smash all of the lies, all of the rhetoric that the left threw at you guys for months and years. He's got blacks, Asians, you name it. He's got every demographic But the difference between identity politics on the left and what Trump has done is Trump is actually picking people who are highly qualified for the position. Whereas the Biden administration was more concerned with just checking the identity politics box. That's all they did, which is why the government's a freaking mess and it is worse off than it was 4 years ago when Trump left. But I just want to make sure to point this out, and we're going to talk about it's giving the media, the mainstream media, a total identity crisis, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out. That for those of you that were lied to for years and months leading up to this election about Trump being a misogynist, about him being homophobic or racist, just look at his cabinet picks. You don't have to go any further than looking at his cabinet picks to see you were fed a lie. It's quite simple. Now, there's two picks. I think the vast majority of Trump's picks, and again, this goes back to accountability, but I think the vast majority of his picks have been good, and I'm excited to see. I love the Vivek Ramaswamy and the Elon Musk Doge. I think that's going to be amazing. There's so many of these picks are good. I like Tulsi Gabbard. I like Kristi Noem. I think Tom Homan. There's so many of these picks that these people are the exact right people for those positions. The Pam Bondi for the new attorney general pick, I think she'll be amazing there. I think she's well qualified for the job. I do wish Gates wouldn't have dropped out because I think right now they're running the old school play against Matt Gaetz in Washington D.C. to smear him. Most of that's going to be unfounded, and I think you're going to see his name pop up again somewhere. Just stand by because I think it's going to happen. And part of me wonders if Trump did it on purpose just to see who in the House, or I'm sorry, the Senate would actually be on board with him and who's not. And if he was doing it on purpose, I think we found out real quick who's on board with pushing through this mandate and who's not. And that's very important to see. But I like most of the picks. There's two picks, however, that when I heard the names, I was slightly disappointed, and I'm going to give you my reasons why. And this goes back to accountability. This goes back to, Trump is not the end all be all. Trump can make mistakes. We have to hold him accountable. He is our employee now. And it's not a bad thing to hold your employees accountable. But this Scott Bessent at Treasury and Marco Rubio for Secretary of State, I think you can gauge how good the pick is, right, for draining the swamp. And that's the measurement here, right, is how much will this individual work towards actually draining the swamp and changing the status quo in Washington, D.C. And you can gauge how well that person will do at trying to drain the swamp or changing the status quo in D.C. based off of the reaction in the media and in the halls of Congress. And these are two picks that it seemed like both sides were really okay with. They're going to just fly through confirmation, no problem. There'll probably be no dirt thrown or whatever, because I think these are establishment picks. Now, I know a lot of you out there, and Scott Bessent, I mentioned him already at the top of the episode about being the first gay man that would serve at the highest level, a cabinet position in history, which that's great. But this isn't about identity politics. It never should have been, and it never should be. I think diversity is good and important as long as the people are qualified for the job. And I think the vast majority of you out there agree with that. The problem I have with Scott Bessent is his history. And Scott Bessent is somebody that worked with George Soros and one of George Soros's financial companies. And that is the part that bothers me, because the other part that bothered me was the reaction to him being picked. A lot of the talking heads on the left in the media and a lot of people in the halls of Congress were totally okay with this pick. So, and Treasury is an important job. As far as the economy goes, our monetary policy, how all of that works. Treasury has a big hand in a lot of those things. Treasury has a big hand in taxes and what we collect, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm hopeful that Scott Bessent will be good, but he doesn't check all the boxes for me of somebody that will actually change the status quo. He doesn't check all the boxes for me of somebody that's actually willing to go into DC and flip over the counting tables, if you will, upset the apple cart. He just doesn't strike me as that person. And for the most part, there were glowing reviews across the board for Scott Bessent, and that bothers me a little bit. You trust me when I say you want the visceral reaction to these picks. You want the Democrats and the bureaucrats and all the people upset about the pick, because that is the indication of whether or not they are going to go in and change things up. And we didn't get that reaction when Scott Bessent's name was mentioned for Treasury. And it's an important role. So I'm going to call it now. I'm not a big fan of this pick. I don't think we're going to get some of the big changes that we are looking for, especially at Treasury, which has a hand in a lot of things economically for this country, and how the government, uses money, brings in money, spends money, creates money, etc. So I'm a little, I don't feel good about this pick. I'll tell you that right now. I think he should have waited a little bit longer and had a few other options other than the two options that he had when he eventually settled on Scott Bessent. Now I'm going to remain hopeful that Scott will do a good job. But based off of his history in his past, I'm slightly worried that he could be that Manchurian candidate that, talks a good game and says all the right things, but deep down inside, is one of those democratic socialist guys. And based off of the people he used to surround himself with, it kind of leads one to wonder. Now, I know that people can change their minds and can see the light, if you will, and realize that the way they used to think and believe and feel it was wrong and not productive for the American people. And Scott may be one of those guys. But right now, I can tell you that I'm not a huge fan of that pick. And the other fan I'm not is Marco Rubio. Now, I know a lot of you out there, who still subscribe to the partisan politics and the groupthink and the tribalism will say, oh, but Marco Rubio has been a great senator from Florida, good conservative, et cetera, et cetera. But Marco Rubio has been in Congress for far too long. And this is one thing that I believe is we needed term limits in Congress a long time ago. We still need them today, and hopefully we can get those passed. Trump mentioned he would try to get term limits for Congress. I don't think he's going to do it, but I think it's going to take a state constitutional convention to get it done, which is an uphill battle all in itself. But that's for another day and another episode. But anybody that's been in for more than 2 terms or a decade or more is a career politician. And they've been there too long and they need to go. And when Marco Rubio's name was mentioned, you got some pushback from the media on the left, which is a good sign. But what's not a good sign is how well it was received in the Senate, how well it was received in the halls of Congress. And again, guys, that's your barometer for all this. How do they respond in the halls of Congress, and how does the media respond? And if all media outlets like the pick, and if the general sentiment from Congress is they like the pick, you've got to question the pick. Because that is the establishment. They all have a vested interest in keeping the establishment and the status quo intact. And when Marco Rubio's name was mentioned, that was the reaction to it, which gives me cause for concern. He's a career politician. He's been there for a long time. He's been in the Senate for a long time. There's been a lot of influence peddling. And if you think Republicans are immune from influence peddling in DC, you're crazy. You just are. You don't actually know how this system works these days. You don't know how the sausage is made. If you think that Republicans are immune to influence peddling in DC, I think you're going to be, sadly surprised, and it's going to train wreck everything you believe in and your candidates, your Republican candidates, because trust me when I say there is just as much influence peddling. It's sometimes probably more on the Republican side of things as there is on the Democrat side of things. Trust me, you can take that to the bank. And a lot of you out there know that and agree with that, but there are some of you out there that are still confused about that. Marco Rubio, I am concerned, is one of those guys that has been in DC for far too long and he's not going to work hard. And he's Secretary of State. He's at state. Okay. That is, for as far as foreign policy goes, that there is no bigger job in the cabinet than Secretary of State. And it reminds me of when Hillary Clinton, who was, in politics, was in the White House when her husband Bill was president, and then became a senator from New York, and then became Secretary of State, and influence peddled to create more wealth for her and her family than at any other time she was in politics. She also wanted to make sure she kept the status quo the same because she is a swamp rat too. And that is my concern with Marco Rubio, who's been in the Senate for a very long time, now going to Secretary of State. There's going to be a lot of influence peddling, my concern, allegedly. I don't know for sure, but my concern is, the reason I bring it up is because anytime somebody's been in the swamp that long, I worry they're going to use their position in government to influence peddle. And the reason influence peddling is not good is because it always goes against the people. Influence peddling always works out for the elites and the political elites. It never works out for the American people. It's how we end up sending $180 billion to Ukraine. That's all because of the influence peddling that has happened over the last 30 years just in Ukraine. That's why the Biden administration right now is still trying to push through aid to Ukraine before they're out of office. That's why they're trying to excuse the debts that Ukraine has on the books with us before they leave office. Is because of all the influence peddling over the last, 30 years in Ukraine. Get a drink of coffee there. But this is the concern, and this is the concern that every American should have. That career politicians who've been exposed to the influence peddling in DC are not immune to it now that Donald Trump is in office. And that is the concern I have about Marco Rubio. So these are the two that I would keep an eye on. And how are we going to keep an eye on them? Well, let's see what Scott Bessent does at Treasury. And let's see the policies that Marco Rubio is trying to push through at state. And don't worry, I know you guys got a busy life, so I will keep an eye on the Secretary of State and the State Department, and I will keep an eye on the Treasury to see what exactly they're doing. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope I have to eat crow on this. I really, really do. But I am concerned about these two picks, and these right now are the two that I will be keeping my eye on the most, because I think these were the worst picks of the litter. And I think everything else, there's a couple like smaller agency picks that I could flip a coin on. But again, because it's a coin flip, I don't even feel the need to bring them up and talk about them on the episode. But mark my words, pay attention to these two picks. Scott Bessent, Marco Rubio. I think they're going to fly through confirmation. I think it's going to be the easiest confirmations of all the picks. And that should be telling to all of you. You're gonna hear glowing reviews on both sides, and you're gonna hear pretty much consensus in the halls of Congress on these two picks. That should concern you. That is our barometer of whether or not somebody's gonna shake up everything or not. All right. I think I beat that horse to death. I want to get into talking about the media and falling. The media is quite literally falling apart. They know their ratings are dropping. They know people are turning them off left and right. It is quite obvious. I mean, like MSNBC is drowning. There's talks. I've mentioned it on a previous episode that they could be sold. They could be broken up and sold into pieces. You've got ABC wanting to make changes with The View and bringing conservative voice into The View. CNN is trying to find their identity again. I think you're going to see a lot of anchors get fired. I think you're going to see MSNBC being sold to someone. There's been talk recently about Elon Musk possibly buying them. That would be interesting. I don't know that it's going to happen. It's possible. I mean, for the right price, the price I think MSNBC would sell at right now is chump change for Elon Musk. So it could happen, but they're in a tailspin right now because they know they have lied to the American people for years, and people have figured it out, especially on the left. They're like, man, nothing you guys have said has turned out to be right in the last 8 to 9 years. Nothing you said. You said Trump was going to jail. He's not going to jail. You said Trump would never be elected. He got elected. You said he was a misogynist and Hitler and a mustache man and all these things. And yet the vast majority of the American people voting bloc voted for him. And they've realized the jig is up. Like, they have been lied to. So they're turning them off, as they should, as everybody should. Turn off the MSNBCs, the CNNs. They are garbage. And they have spent more time trying to influence and manipulate their viewers rather than just tell them the facts as they are. And that has become obvious. So obvious that people are turning them off. But there is a definitive identity crisis. And recently there was a couple things that really caught my attention. One, there's this journalist who was at the National Press Club doing a interview or whatever, and or not an interview, but a presentation at the National Press Club recently. His name is Jim Vandehei, and he has like a total meltdown at the press club, the National Press Club, about Elon Musk and how Twitter's not journalism, et cetera. And it's crazy because they know, like, the writing is on the wall that journalism is dead. But what they fail to see is that journalism is dead because of them, not because of us, not because of the people. The people trusted them to bring them news, right? Unbiased, just factual information, news. Journalism is dead. They're starting to see it's dead, but they're in the denial process still of this death, right? This is like literally you're seeing all the stages of death and dying, right? Like right now they're in the denial phase. They're dead. They just don't know it yet. I mean, I think they know it's coming, but they're in the denial phase. So they're just going to blame. I don't know. It might be a mix between denial and anger, but you're going to see it in this. Let me cue this up for you guys. You're going to see this guy totally melts down. Let me bring this up right here. Totally melts down. And then we'll talk about it. So here you go. Here's this guy freaking
matters. Everything we do is under fire. Elon Musk sits on Twitter every day, or X today, saying like, we are the media. You are the media. My message to Elon Musk is bullshit. You're not the media.
Oh, bullshit.
You having a blue check mark, a Twitter handle, and 300 words of cleverness doesn't make you a reporter any more than me looking at your head and seeing that you have a brain and telling you have an awesome set of tools makes me a damn neurosurgeon, right? Like what we do, what journalists do, what you did in Mississippi, what Al Jazeera does in the Middle East. You don't proclaim yourself to be a reporter. Like that's nonsense. Like being a reporter is hard, really hard. You have to care. You have to do the hard work. You have to get up every single day and say, I want to get to the closest approximation of the truth without any fear, without any favoritism. You don't do that by popping off on Twitter. You don't do that by having an opinion. You do it by doing the hard work.
Yeah, come on, slow clap, everybody. Whoa. First of all, I've got to say.
Yeah, so then it goes into that was a clip that they played on Morning Joe, and then it cuts to like all the people on Morning Joe clapping for the guy. Wow, that's so rich, isn't it? You're not a reporter if you have 300 words of cleverness. That doesn't make you a reporter. Well, newsflash, bud. Neither does having a 300 word or a 3,000 word piece that is bullshit and lies, right? And this is what they just don't understand. Like, yes, maybe 300 words of cleverness doesn't make you a reporter, but neither does 300 words or a whole piece in the New York Times or Washington Post that is literally skewed or full of lies or, and I hate this word, misinformation. And they just don't get it. They're so tone deaf. And it's so rich hearing somebody talk about, somebody lying and that they're not a reporter. And being a reporter is hard. They have lied to the American people for years with their own set of facts. And it's obvious. Everybody sees it. That's why they don't buy their shit papers. That's why they don't watch their shit TV. And it's so rich that was Morning Joe on MSNBC playing that clip and then clapping like, oh, yeah, see, we're all still journalists and reporters. No, you're not. And we know you're not. We know you're full of shit. We know you lie all the time to the American people. And we know that every piece you write and every story you run has your bias about your political leanings and your side in it. We know what you offer is propaganda. It's not news. It's never been news. I don't think it's been news since around 2008 to 2012. I really don't. And I think it's sad that it's taken us over a decade to figure that out and start tuning you guys out. But I genuinely believe that journalism is dead, and I think they know it too. That's why they're having outbursts like this, because journalism is dead. And right now they're just in the denial/anger phase, and you're going to see them lashing out against their the readers, the people, right? The viewers, they're going to blame us for their failures, right? Which just tells you how tone deaf they are, how ridiculous they are, and even more why you should just turn them off because they're blaming you for their failures, right? Just think about that for a second. They're blaming you, us, the people, for their failures. They're blaming people like Elon Musk, who bought a company that was censoring voices all over the platform and deplatforming people. I mean, guys, they deplatformed. Let's not have short memory spans. They deplatformed the sitting president of the United States, right? If there's one person that we need to be able to hear from in any capacity, whether it be on Twitter, social media, or in front of the news cameras, that would be like, and they've done it essentially. That'd be like MSNBC, NBC, ABC, CBS saying, we're never going to run a press conference with the president, Donald Trump, ever again. That was the equivalent of what Twitter did when they deplatformed it. And a lot of those networks said, we're not going to run his speeches and et cetera while he was on the campaign trail because they're full of lies. No, it's because they weren't full of lies. The Trump was one of the only ones telling you the truth about what was going wrong with the country. And because they live in their little bubbles in DC and in New York City, in their little elitist bubbles, they don't actually know what's going on with Americans. And they buy all the lies that the bureaucrats and all them tell them, and they skew the data, just like the Justice Department, the FBI skewed crime data, right? The Labor Department skewed jobs data. You know, we've even had a skewed GDP data, which will be revised here. I think today was the revision date. And I said it in a previous episode, mark my words, it will be revised down. It will, because there is no economic growth right now. And the only GDP we have is borrowed money, spending from borrowed money, which is not genuine productivity. But they believe all those lies and they spew them out with their cognitive bias and they lie to you. And now they're blaming you that you think Twitter and social media and places like TikTok are better places to go get your news, that independent journalists are better places to get your news, which they are, because they're not trying to lie to you. And your fellow citizens who have accounts on these social media platforms, they're not trying to lie to you. When they see something happen, they're saying it. And we are seeing things closer to real time than we ever have in American history because of technology. So, I mean, I guess technology does have some good sides to it. I think maybe we spend too much time on social media platforms, but we are able to see real news, real stories, real things happening in communities in real time. Like we knew that FEMA was not helping Trump supporters. Why? Because we had fellow citizens on the ground with cameras, with phones reporting it, not as, genuine reporters like this numbskull thinks they are, but just citizens doing what citizens do, taking care of each other, reporting, saying, something's up with FEMA here. They're not helping certain people and we don't know why. And it seems to be the people they're not willing to help happen to be Trump supporters or conservatives or Republicans. And the media was like, oh, that's not happening. And Trump brought it up and talked about, the media, that's not happening. That's not happening. And then it come to find out it was. It absolutely was happening. We already knew about it. We knew in real time it was happening. And these people live in such a bubble that they don't get it. They don't realize that the failure is theirs and theirs alone. They don't realize that what they spew is lies and biased propaganda. And if they would just take the next 6 months to go out and listen to the Americans, stop fucking talking, shut your mouths, stop blaming everybody for your failures, because they are your failures, and just go out into middle America, all over America, get out of your bubbles in DC and New York City and go listen to the American people. Go listen. I advise the Democrat Party, if they even want to have any chance at salvaging their party, same with their old guard Republican Party, get out of your elitist bubbles and go out into America for the next 6 months. Just shut your mouths and listen. Then you'll figure out once and for all what's going on. Because there is such a huge disconnect between the shit you try to shovel in our faces on your quote unquote news channels or your newspapers and what is actually going on in America. The reason Donald Trump won is because we know there is a disconnect, because we live this life. We live in this country. We produce in this country. We make this country what it is. We are the ones boots on the ground, seeing it every day and living in it every day, while you sit in your ivory towers with your elitism in DC and New York City and California and Los Angeles and San Francisco, and you live in a false reality, and you shove all the shit that you think is news down our throats. But the disconnect is we are looking at reality and what's actually going on in our day-to-day lives and watching your news stories, which they're not news stories. They're propaganda, which is why everybody's figuring out. And we're going, what the fuck are you talking about? The American people are looking at you going, what are you even talking about? You don't know what you're talking about. And you guys think that you're so important, that we value your opinions or your thoughts so much that we just buy everything you say, hook, line, and sinker. But the disconnect is we are living it. We live it every day. You know, we don't, when we see, you know, a biological man go into a women's restroom and our kids are in there, we go get our kids out of there because we don't want them at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, 9 years old, 12 years old, seeing male genitalia in the bathroom because that they're not old. They just need to be kids. They just need to be kids. And when we've seen these males playing in women's sports, because we're there. We are the parents sitting in the stands. We are the cousins and the grandmas and the grandpas that are sitting there watching this unfairness happen. Watching our daughters work their asses off their whole careers to be very, very good in the sport of their choice, only to be beat by a biological man. We're the ones sitting in the stands watching that shit happen. You're sitting in your ivory towers fucking clueless of what's going on. But virtue signal to us, the people who are seeing the unfairness on display, going, oh, no, it's a great thing. And we're like, no, it's not, because I just saw my daughter's dreams get crushed. It's not okay. It's not fucking okay. But that is why it's like that. It's how millions, 10, 20, 30 million illegals can come in and commit crime in our communities. And you are sitting in your ivory tower in DC and New York City reporting the news how this is a good thing and we need to take care of all these immigrants. We're the ones actually dealing with the crime. We're the ones actually putting the pieces back together in our communities. That's why when you report your stories and we look at you cross-eyed, we're like, what the fuck are you even talking about? Because you media, you elitists, you bubble people don't understand it. You are reporting what you want us to believe and think, and you think you're so important that we just buy it hook, line, and sinker. And we don't, because we are living the reality of your bad policy decisions and your propaganda. And then there's a huge disconnect there because we are living it and you're not. But you want a virtue signal to us, the people who actually get shit done in this country and actually have to deal with all this shit, while you sit in posh studios and newsrooms in DC and New York telling us what the fuck we should believe. Which is why we rebuked you. It's why there's been this huge repudiation of your bullshit, because you're so out of touch. So just here, let me help you out. Shut the fuck up for the next 6 months and go out into America and just listen to what the American people are saying. Watch what the American people are going through. See it for yourself. And I apologize for all the F-bombs, but it just gets under my skin that these people are so aloof, so stupid, so elitist, so self-absorbed that they are blaming their failures in the media on us. And it's like, you guys, you won't get it. You're idiots. And it's why people are turning them off left and right. You've even got some that are just, you can see their brains pretzeling, like Jonathan Capehart, I think that's how you say his name, over on MSNBC. Dude is literally having his brain pretzeled because he has been telling his viewers and he has been buying the idea that Trump is a homophobe and misogynist and Hitler and Nazi and all these things. And he's literally been pumping that garbage out into the airwaves only to find out that, oh no, Trump actually appointed Scott Bessent for Treasury, or well, nominated him. He can't appoint him, but he's nominated him. And listen to this. Like, this guy's mind is completely pretzel. Let me make sure I've got this queued up properly. I do. Okay. Listen to this. Listen to this pretzeling.
John, yesterday, my husband, because yesterday was Saturday, so Friday, the announcement of the Treasury Secretary came out. And I was like, that name sounds familiar.
One of our people.
Well, that's the point I was getting to. So yesterday morning, my Nick says,
Right.
wait, Scott Bessent is gay?
He is.
And married? and has children.
He does.
Yesterday, when I brought this up, if he's confirmed, would be the highest ranking out LGBT person ever to be appointed and confirmed by the United States Senate. And I said, I'm kind of conflicted about it. It's Trump. I'm kind of conflicted about this.
Look, I think in that case, credit where it's due. I think I think we expect the markets to shoot up when they open in Asia here in a little bit. I think Wall Street likes the guy. It is very interesting that, yes, it is Trump and not one of our team who made that historic nomination. But
there you go. Wow. It's a little bit of a surprise that it was Trump and not one of our team. Do you see the groupthink there? I mean, this is a case study, guys, in tribalism and groupthink. I'm conflicted. Because obviously Jonathan Capehart is gay and is also married, has a husband. And him and his husband were talking about how Trump nominated Scott Bessent, who is an openly gay man, married, has children with his husband, living the American dream, doing entrepreneur. And again, I'm not 100% on Scott Bessent, guys, because of his previous work with the Soros company. But I digress. Like, he is totally conflicted. And it's just a surprise that it was Trump that did this and not somebody from our team. Fucking crazy, guys. Like, there's not a Trump supporter out there that is surprised by this. There's not one of us that's like, what? Trump nominated a gay man for one of the highest cabinet positions in the cabinet? What? No, we're not surprised by this because we weren't listening to the bullshit. And going back to my previous point, when you live in a bubble, in an echo chamber, and you subscribe to groupthink and tribalism, this is what happens. This is a case study in tribalism and groupthink that this man, Jonathan Capehart, is conflicted. He's conflicted because he supports this Scott Bessent being Treasury Secretary, but Trump, Hitler, the guy that we said is a misogynist and a homophobe and all this stuff, is the one who appointed him. And it wasn't my side. It wasn't my team that appointed him. Well, what the fuck does it matter? And see, that is why you can't subscribe to tribalism and groupthink. That is a case study in real time on display with because if there would be no confliction if you didn't subscribe to tribalism and groupthink. There would be no confliction, which is why most of us who voted for Trump and don't care about the Republican Party or the Democrat Party are like, yeah, no, this makes sense. Yeah, there's no confliction here. I'm not conflicted. Why? Because we're not misogynists. We're not homophobes. We're not all the ists and isms that we have been claimed to be by the same media people that are now perplexed and confused that Donald Trump would have picked a gay man to be head of Treasury. We're not surprised. We're not conflicted. We're not confused because we're not the ist. We're not all the things that you said we were. Because we don't subscribe to your ideologies and your groupthink and your tribalism and that we're better than and the highbrowed, I went to college. Well, so did I. So did a lot of people I know that don't think the way that you think. And furthermore, going to college doesn't make you smart. A lot of times it doesn't even make you educated. So I would stop using that if you're on the left as like some banner of awesome and elite status, because you're not. But this is what happens, guys. This is a perfect case study in what it looks like to subscribe to tribalism and groupthink. And it's also an add-on to the case study that the media has lied to you for so long that they don't even know how to act. Like, you could see this guy's brain being pretzeled in real time. Like, I was talking to my husband and he was like, Scott Bessent, he's openly gay man. And it's like, yes, man. Like, why is this even news? And that's what you guys don't understand. Like, to us, this isn't even news. You notice at the top of this episode, I'm talking about my concerns with Scott Bessent based off of his previous work history. Don't give a crap that he's gay. It doesn't matter. Because identity politics tell you that the only thing that matters is the identity. Whereas what most Americans subscribe to, and those of us that are actually living life and like running America and making sure that America ticks, we don't care about identity stuff. Like, we don't care. We don't care if you're black. We don't care if you're white. We don't care if you're Asian or Hispanic. We don't care. We don't care if you're gay. We don't care if you're trans. We don't give a shit. Like, so for us, it's like, how is this even news? And if you watched other outlets, that are not left leaning, or more right leaning, or just more down the road, or those that are independent journalists, when they announced that Trump picked Scott Bessent, there was no mention that he was gay, because we don't care. Like, it doesn't matter to us. Doesn't matter to us if you're gay or straight or what. We don't care. Now, we do have boundaries when it comes to, sexuality and things like that. And those boundaries are typically around our children. Outside of that, we don't effing care, guys. But to watch their brains be pretzeled in real time, that, I'm so conflicted. I'm surprised that it wasn't our side that picked him. It's because your side is actually the side of bigotry. Because anytime identity is the most important thing, and, a demographic, whether it be race, religion, sexuality, or whatever, then that means you're automatically bigoted against anybody that does not fall into those categories. Your side is the side of bigotry and mostly closeted racism. That's the truth. You don't see it because of the tribalism and the groupthink. We see it. We see it clearly. To us, it was not news that Scott Bessent it was only news because it's like, okay, well, what's his background? What's his experience level? What's he going to bring to the table? That's what I was looking at. That's what I'm concerned with. Could care less that the guy's gay. Didn't care. It's not even newsworthy to me. And for the most of the American people out there, that is not news to us. We don't care. Because again, we're the ones living out here in the world. Like, we have gay friends. We have friends of all different colors and backgrounds and ethnicities. And because we're the ones actually out here living life. You guys are sitting in your ivory tower in your little elite bubbles that try to put everything into identity politics. And we're looking at you with crazy eyes because we're like, what the hell are you guys even talking about? Like, you have no clue what you're talking about in America, which is why nobody listens to you anymore and nobody's watching your shows or reading your newspapers. Because you're not out here in America with the rest of us who have moved well beyond identity politics and well beyond all this other shit. And we're just like, what? You guys are completely out of touch. You don't even know what's going on in your own country, which just shows you we've got work to do to dismantle this elitist structure that has taken place in Washington, D.C. and on the coast. I mean, it's fine if you guys want to be elitist in New York City and LA and San Francisco, but DC should be off limits to that elitist mentality. And that is what we need to dismantle here in America. All right, I think I went down the rabbit hole very thoroughly. I'm going to wrap it up there, guys. I've got a long day ahead of me, and we've only got a couple days of Thanksgiving, so I got to get some stuff done before we take a break before Thanksgiving. Just programming note for you guys. There will not be an episode on Thursday and Friday of this week. I will be back with you tomorrow, though, for another episode. We'll have another conversation. But Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, nope. But I'll be back the Monday after. Just a quick reminder, guys, if you haven't picked up a copy of We the Puppets, the audience for the best illusion ever performed, that will put a lot of this stuff in perspective, especially my chapter on groupthink. I highly recommend you guys pick up the book. If you haven't picked up the book, Christmas is right around the corner, guys. It will make a great stocking stuffer. It will make a great out-of-the-box gift for anybody. It doesn't care. I don't care what part of the political spectrum they land on. They will like the book. I've had people from all spectrums read it and give me feedback and say they liked it. Some have not, but that's okay. But this because they're still a little stuck in the groupthink and tribalism. They'll get their way through it, I promise. Also, guys, if you're listening to this on iTunes, I did it again, Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it's always going to be iTunes to me. So if I say iTunes, guys, I'm talking about Apple Podcasts. But if you're listening to this over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Also, leave a rating and review. That one, it does two things. It tells me what you like and what you don't like about the show, but it also moves it up in the algorithm so more people can find the show organically. It will mean the world to me. And yeah, that's it on that front. There was something else I was going to say about that, and it just totally blanked from my brain. But it doesn't matter. Oh yeah, it helps people find it organically, and I read every single one of them. So it means the world to me when you guys do it. I appreciate it. That's it for today. I'm going to get out of here. I hope you guys have a wonderful Tuesday, and I will be back with you tomorrow. But until then, guys, stay informed, stay strong, but most importantly, stay in